All right, so we had another crazy week in the markets. We are back into earnings season, which is interesting and exciting. We had bank earnings and some other companies. Stocks hit a new all-time high again. Bitcoin's down a little bit, but we're still right around 118 roughly at the time of me making this video. I think we're going to go higher eventually. First things first, if you get value out of the video, please like and subscribe. Check out the links below. So getting right into it, let's start out with earnings here, and then I'll transition into some other stories. The first company here, Fastenal, they beat earnings and revenue. This is a company I do have on a watch list. It looks like they were actually down on that news, but then they went right back up again. The next one is BlackRock, talking about that for obvious reasons. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, asset manager in the world. Also beat earnings and revenue. They did lower guidance a little bit. They were down quite a bit on that news. They were down about 6% roughly, but looks like they actually closed basically flat on the week. The next one is Citibank or Citigroup. They did beat earnings and revenue. They were up quite nicely on the week. Wells Fargo also beat earnings. They did lower their guidance a little bit. They were down on the week on that news. No surprise there. ASML, this is one of the larger positions I hold. This is probably a top 10 position for me. They actually released pretty good earnings, but they did lower guidance a little bit. Honestly, I'm not concerned. This is going to happen every now and then. I just think that, hey, I mean, the stock's down about 10% on that news. To me, it's just a buying opportunity. I still think they're a really good company, and I think they're going to be okay long term. JP Morgan beat earnings. Another important thing that I believe it was Jamie Dimon who said it, but I could be wrong on that. They basically came out and said, yeah, we're not seeing any more delinquencies or mispayments, those kind of things, than we were a year ago. So that data basically points to the economy is not really in that much trouble. But again, the inflation report maybe shows a little bit different there, but I'll get into that when I get into that. So as far as JP Morgan goes, they did beat earnings. They were up a little bit on that news. And again, the big banks, like they have really good barometers on how the economy is doing. And if they're saying the economy is okay, it's okay. Now, technically, you could argue that, the amount of delinquencies is higher than average. Now, depending on which numbers you go by, that is true. But my opinion, at least of things, is, again, I could be completely wrong here, so don't necessarily take what I say as gospel. My opinion is the economy is okay. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not good. It's kind of in between. The next one is Bank of America. Bank of America, they did beat earnings. They were up on the news. The next one is Johnson & Johnson, which actually had a surprisingly good earnings report. They beat earnings. They actually raised guidance. They were up actually quite significantly on that news, about 5%. The next one is PLD. They're one of the biggest, maybe even the biggest U.S. REIT. I don't own them, but I do watch them for that reason. They actually beat their estimates, but they were down on the week, although it looks like they were actually up on that news. I think that part of the sell-off might have been the bonds, but the next one is United Airlines. Another good barometer on how the economy is doing are the airlines. They beat earnings. They did miss revenue. It was kind of a neutral earnings report. Looks like they were actually up on that news. Abbott Laboratories, this is another stock I do own, and I am actually currently buying. I think it's bordering on expensive, but I think it's definitely still worth buying here. They did beat earnings and revenue. However, they were actually down on the news. The next one is Cintas, another one I have on a watch list. They're just way too expensive. Beat earnings and revenue. The next one and the last one on the list here is Pepsi. They beat earnings and revenue. They were actually up quite significantly on that news as well, about 7%. So that is earnings from this past week. As far as the stock market goes, like I said, stocks, at least the S&P and the NASDAQ, hit a new all-time high. I don't know if the S&P closed at an all-time high. The NASDAQ did, but the S&P did go above 6,300 intraday this week. Again, my position on the stock market is always I'm always going to be a net buyer of stocks. Again, if you're a trader, that's not really my philosophy. That's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is medium to long term, as in, and by that I mean years, if not decades. Some people's idea of medium might be months, but I'm a long term guy. And when you look at the long term stocks always go up eventually, right? Stocks always go up eventually. Obviously, some catastrophic event could change that, but you look at the existing catastrophic events that have happened in the last 150 years, none of those have been enough to knock out the stock market. So again, based on that information, you always want to be a net buyer, right? You always want to be a net buyer. So my position on stocks, I think we're going to see a decent sized pullback at some point, because I do think the market's a little bit overvalued. And again, markets never go up in a straight line. I think that there's going to have to be something to scare away the weak hands. I don't know what it'll be. Maybe it'll be recession fears. Maybe Trump doubles down on tariffs again. Who knows what it'll be. But something's going to happen that's going to scare people off, because it has to happen, because stocks can't just go up in a straight line, or else everybody would just YOLO into options and everybody would get rich. It's not how it works, right? So I'm always going to be a net buyer, but I do think over the next 2-3 months, maybe it's earlier, maybe it's later, but I do think at some point between now and the end of the year, we're going to see another 10, 15, 20% pullback. And enough to scare people off, and then the market will go right back up again. And that might be the Fed's cue to cut rates, which very well could signal another bottom and another run higher. And again, something that people, isn't being talked about that much. It's being talked about, but it's not being talked about that much, is if we look at how much the stock market is up since that bottom on April 2nd, I believe it was. So if we go back to, I'm not going to do it this way, because that's not too hard to figure out the exact bottom going like this. But if you go here, just the straight price chart from the bottom, the S&P is now up 26%. Right? That is just crazy, and that's just over 3 months. And even year to date, we're up 7%. So up 7% in just under 8 months. That's pretty good. That implies we're going to be up maybe 12-13% to end the year. I don't know if that's realistic. I'd be surprised if we close the year that much higher, because there isn't that much good news out there. But who knows, right? Who knows? For all we know, recession fears are gone. The Fed's cutting. The tariff threat is gone, and by the end of the year, we're at 7,000 on the S&P. Who knows? So the one other piece of news here, as far as stocks go, is the inflation report, the CPI report. It did go up to 2.7, which is up a little bit from the past couple months. 2.4 in May, 2.3 in April. So inflation is up. But my pushback to this would be, we kind of expected this with the tariffs. I don't think this is shocking to anyone. The big problem with this is, the Trump administration, and even a lot of people out there, me included, are pushing and think that the Fed should be cutting rates. The problem with that is it's kind of hard for them to be like, hey, yeah, we're going to cut rates when inflation's going up, because that's kind of the whole point of keeping rates higher in the first place. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because I don't see them being too eager to cut rates unless inflation goes down. Or, if we see a recession, they probably cut rates regardless, but it's going to be tough. But the one pushback to that point, I guess, would be people would say, hey, tariffs are typically they're going to be a one-time shock to the system, right? Tariffs, it's not like they're going to be some perpetual thing, because when you put on tariffs, they get priced in and it's gone, right? Not that it's gone, but the effect on the CPI is a one-time thing. So as long as Trump doesn't go around imposing more tariffs, the inflation rate probably will come back down. No, we won't know that for sure until the next 2-3 months or so, but it probably will start to come back down. Obviously, nobody knows, but it probably will start to come back down. My prediction still is, I still think we're going to get a rate cut or two by the end of the year, whether that's because inflation comes down, or we see a recession, or we see a big pullback in the stock market. At the end of the day, they're going to cut at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, again, that could be a year from now for all we know, right? It could be a year, but they're going to cut at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So we have another major Bitcoin treasury company by the looks of things here. Adam Back, who's a Bitcoin OG. Adam Back's Bitcoin treasury company, MSTR, is launching with 30,000 Bitcoin. It's the largest Bitcoin SPAC with $1.5 billion in cash funding. So I talk about this all the time. Like, this is the future, right? This is the future. Like, look at how much this has changed in a matter of 5 years. I believe it was August of 2020 that MSTR strategy, or MicroStrategy at the time, became the first Bitcoin treasury company. We've gone from one Bitcoin treasury company 5 years ago, not even 5 years ago, not quite 5 years ago, to I think we're at like 150 now. And I mean, not to mention too, I believe we have probably 10-ish of them that have over 10,000 Bitcoin. And this is not going to change. Like, this really is not going to change. This is only going to accelerate. It's only a matter of time until strategies in the S&P 500, not to mention they're already a top 100 market cap company in the US. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And after that, another thing that I talk about all the time is it's only a matter of time until we start seeing ETFs that are tracking Bitcoin treasury companies. There's going to be ETFs that say, hey, we're just going to hold the top 100 companies based on the amount of... I really hope they do it based on the amount of Bitcoin they hold, not the market cap that they have. We'll see how they do that, but I really hope that's how they do it. But regardless, there's going to be ETFs that are going to hold just Bitcoin treasury companies. And those ETFs are going to get massive amounts of inflow. Not to mention, too, the actual Bitcoin treasury companies are getting massive amounts of inflows, right? So, and speaking of that, from Eric Balchunas here, the fact that Vanguard is now the largest shareholder of MSTR is proof that God has a sense of humor, or at least that was my reaction to Vildana Harjic, who wrote the story today. So Vanguard is kind of famous for refusing to, have a Bitcoin ETF, or even I think they don't even on their investing platform. I believe they don't even allow their users to invest in the Bitcoin ETFs. I'm not sure about like strategy and those kind of ones, but I'm pretty sure they still don't let people invest in the ETFs. But now they're the largest holder of strategy. So this is kind of interesting in several ways. The first and most obvious one is BlackRock now holds over 700,000 Bitcoin. They're one of, if not the largest asset managers in the world. Vanguard is the largest shareholder of Strategy, which is the largest Bitcoin treasury company in the world. For all the people out there that are still like, oh, I'm not sure about Bitcoin, I think this Bitcoin thing's a scam, or whatever garbage they're pumping out there, it's like the largest asset managers in the world are adopting Bitcoin. Like they couldn't be doing it more. It's debatable whether or not they could be doing it any more aggressively than they currently are. And yet you're still bearish, like you're still not going to buy. Like, to me, it's just kind of crazy, right? It's kind of crazy. And full disclosure, Strategy is the largest position, my largest stock position. So take that for what you will. But I'm bullish, as you can say. And speaking of Strategy, they acquired 4,200 Bitcoin this past week. They are now over 600,000 Bitcoin per coin. This is why I wanted to talk about that. Again, 600,000 Bitcoin for one company. That's about 3% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist. I don't think people realize how significant this is. They're slowly catching on, to be fair, but I really don't think people realize just how significant this is. Strategy, I've said time and time again, they're going to be a top 10 company in the world. They might even be the number one company in the world someday. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They're constantly being included in more indexes. You have Vanguard that's doubling down on them. You have pension funds that are buying their stock. You have like sovereign wealth funds. I believe Norway or some one of those is holding them. So the price of Bitcoin will go up forever, and because of that, the price of strategy stock will go up forever. And something that I talk about a lot before, but I think a lot of people don't understand is a lot of people think that they're taking a lot of risk by doing what they're doing, and that's just not true. I listened to the interview of their CEO this past week, and I believe it was for STRF, or maybe it was STRD, one of the two. When they issued that security, it's backed up like 5 times. Like, I don't know what the number is, but like, whatever. They issued like $5 billion worth of it. It's got like $25 billion worth of Bitcoin backing it up. So people think that what they're doing is really risky, but they're not. Like, they're really not. And again, Michael Saylor and I know other people have talked about this time and time again, but if strategies, like if their debt gets rated by the big ratings agencies and they actually are honest, it's going to be pristine. Like, it's going to be pristine. Again, Michael Saylor has talked about this time and time again. They have, one of the best, debt situations of any of the companies in the S&P. Like, they're actually quite a bit above average. You ask the average Joe, you probably think, oh, they're terrible. They're like, Beyond Meat or one of these companies that people think they're on the verge of bankruptcy, and it's like, they're really not, right? They're really not, right? And eventually, more and more people are going to figure this out. And the last thing I wanted to talk about here from Mandrick on Twitter, Bitcoin at all-time highs, and I've received 0 texts. We're either early or I'm insufferable, probably both. This is another thing that I've noticed too. I know probably, 10-ish people off the top of my head that know that I have Bitcoin, and 0 of them have asked me, hey, how do you buy it? Or, that kind of stuff. Like literally, I mean, people have brought it up, but none of them to anything other than like the most passing of passing conversations. And I'm old enough to remember I was around back in the 2021 bull market. I do remember there was a few people back then that asked me, hey, how do I get into this? Or they brought it up. But this time, like I say, that number is still at 0, right? That number is still at 0. And I'm kind of interested here because I got a really big event in a couple of weeks. So we'll see if anyone brings it up. But this is and looking back on that, the reason that I bring that up is that this was like literally like, I believe this was Christmas of 2021. So this was like right after the all-time, like right around the all-time high on that last halving. And that's when people were asking. Now, again, it was only a few people, but still, right? Again, I think that's one of the ways that in investing when we've reached a top or when it may be a little bit frothy. When the average Joe who couldn't care less, up until it hit it's ripping and everybody's making all that money. Like when your average Joe who couldn't be bothered, up until recently starts to get into it, then maybe you're a little bit too far. But again, I still think Bitcoin's going up forever. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. Like I said at the start of the video, please like, subscribe, comment, check out those links below, and stay tuned for more.